Second sound test. Can you hear me from the conference line? 1, 2.
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Bonjour. We are gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat peoples. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to meaningful reconciliation and respectful partnership with Indigenous peoples. I am pleased to be here at 8 Wing Trenton alongside General Wayne Eyre, Chief of Defense Staff, and Lieutenant General Alain Pelletier, Deputy Commander of Norad. More than 6 decades ago, against the backdrop of the Cold War and the threat of a Soviet air attack, Canada and the United States established the world's only binational military command, NORAD. Le NORAD est chargé de la surveillance et de la défense de l'espace aérien nord-américain et par conséquent des flancs nord et ouest de l'OTAN. Recently, the Prime Minister and I visited NORAD headquarters in Colorado and saw firsthand the unparalleled collaboration between the Canadian Armed Forces and the American Armed Forces. Our military members work together, train together, and live together on both sides of the world's longest undefended border. Ensemble, ils assurent le bon fonctionnement de NORAD et la sécurité des populations de nos deux pays. NORAD has continually adapted and evolved in response to new threats. Today, we turn another page and begin NORAD's next chapter. As autocratic regimes threaten the rules-based international order that has protected us for decades, and as our competitors develop new technologies like hypersonic weapons and advanced cruise missiles, there is a pressing need to modernize Canada's NORAD capabilities. Today, I am here to announce that Canada is investing $4.9 billion over the next 6 years to modernize our continental defenses and to protect Canadians from new and emerging threats. This is the most significant upgrade to NORAD from a Canadian perspective in almost 4 decades. Aujourd'hui, j'annonce que le Canada va investir 4,9 milliards de dollars sur une période de 6 ans afin de moderniser nos capacités de défense continentale pour protéger les Canadiens contre les menaces nouvelles et émergentes. C'est notre mise à niveau la plus importante depuis près de 4 décennies. Les capacités intégrées de nos adversaires potentiels, combinées aux effets des changements climatiques, signifient que le Canada ne peut pas compter uniquement sur sa géographie pour nous protéger. Il est plus important que jamais de veiller à ce que les membres des forces armées canadiennes disposent des outils dont ils ont besoin pour assurer notre sécurité et notre souveraineté. This plan will deliver modern, state-of-the-art equipment for our Canadian Armed Forces, who put their lives on the line each and every day to ensure the security and the sovereignty of our country. It will create tremendous opportunities for Canadian industry and will ensure that Indigenous-owned businesses benefit from these investments throughout the supply chain. In addition to these immediate investments, this plan is funded for the long term. This plan has a total value of approximately $40 billion over the next 20 years, and it will deliver new capabilities to protect Canadians for generations to come. En plus de ces investissements immédiats, ce plan est chiffré pour le long terme aussi. Il est évalué à environ 40 milliards de dollars sur les 20 prochaines années. Et ce plan va livrer de nouvelles capacités de défense pour protéger les Canadiens pour les générations à venir. Building on the U.S.-Canada joint statement on NORAD modernization signed last summer, I will now describe the 5 sections of our plan. First, we will make significant investments in new capabilities to detect threats to North America. With better information, we improve our ability to make the best decisions for Canada and respond to threats to our shared continent. In close coordination with the United States, we will establish the backbone of a brand new Northern Approaches surveillance system to enhance surveillance and early warning threats to our continent. Most notably, this will include 3 initiatives: an Arctic over-the-horizon radar system to provide early warning radar coverage and threat tracking from the Canada-US border to the Arctic Circle; a polar over-the-horizon radar system to provide early warning radar coverage over and beyond the northernmost approaches to North America, including the Canadian Arctic archipelago; and a new system called Crossbow, a network of sensors with classified capabilities distributed across northern Canada as another layer of detection. Ces 3 systèmes vont améliorer de manière considérable notre connaissance situationnelle de ce qui entre dans l'espace aérien canadien en provenance du Nord. L'élément central actuel de surveillance du Norad, le système d'alerte du Nord, sera maintenu jusqu'à ce que ces nouveaux systèmes soient en place. And finally, we will build on commitments for space-based surveillance announced in our defense policy, Strong, Secure, Engaged, by launching a space-based surveillance project which will use satellites to perform surveillance of the Earth's surface for intelligence and threat tracking purposes. Ensemble, ces investissements amélioreront considérablement notre connaissance de la situation et permettront au Canada d'être averti plus tôt et plus précisément. Now let me turn to our new investments in additional technologies to enhance our decision making. Si une menace à l'encontre du Canada est détectée, les commandants n'ont pas beaucoup de temps pour évaluer ses impacts possibles sur les Canadiens. And for this reason, it is crucial that commanders and policymakers have a comprehensive and an accurate operating picture that integrates data from all domain sensors and uses machine learning, quantum and cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. We are investing in 7 new initiatives to enhance technology-enabled decision-making. These include modernizing command and control information systems, expanding Canada's contribution to the NORAD Pathfinder initiative that takes advantage of cloud-based computing and machine learning to ensure that NORAD commanders can make informed, and rapid decisions. Modernizing the Canadian Combined Air Operations Centre, constructing a new positioning, navigation, and timing capability to assist with air navigation in remote areas, renewing the CAF's high and low frequency radio capability, enhancing satellite communications in the Arctic, which is central to the CAF's ability to protect Canadians and conduct emergency responses and search and rescue, and procuring and installing new digital radios and network equipment. Ces investissements vont permettre d'exploiter toutes les capacités de l'informatique du XXIe siècle et vont fournir aux commandants des outils de pointe pour prendre plus rapidement des décisions cruciales. Troisièmement, nous allons accueillir de nouvelles capacités défensives pour dissuader et, si nécessaire, pour vaincre les menaces aérospatiales. Canada is procuring new advanced air-to-air missiles with capability to engage threats from short, from medium, and long-term ranges. As we announced just a few months ago, Canada is in the finalization phase of the procurement process for 88 new F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin, and these advanced missiles will be compatible with our future fighters. Nous allons aussi travailler à l'élaboration d'options pour une capacité canadienne de défense aérienne basée au sol. Fourth, we are investing in new infrastructure and support capabilities so that the Canadian Armed Forces have the resources that they need to launch and sustain operations in the Canadian North. La mise à niveau de nos infrastructures est plus urgente que jamais, alors que les changements climatiques et le réchauffement des températures ont un impact majeur sur notre infrastructure actuelle. Warmer temperatures mean that the Canadian Armed Forces are increasingly tasked with sovereignty-related operations, intelligence and surveillance activities, maritime and air interdiction, search and rescue, and emergency response. And this means we are investing in acquiring additional air-to-air refueling aircraft, upgrading northern basing infrastructure at 4 locations in Canada's north, upgrading fighter infrastructure and Norad quick reaction alert capabilities at bases across the country, modernizing our air operational training infrastructure. We are making these investments in partnership with Indigenous communities, provinces, territories, and other government departments so that new infrastructure can fulfill the needs of our military and of local communities. Comme 5e volet de notre plan, nous créerons un nouveau programme scientifique et technologique pour la défense de l'Amérique du Nord au sein de Recherche et Développement pour la Défense Canada. This program will ensure that we are steps ahead of new threats. Using Canadian innovation and knowledge, the program will address strategic continental defense capability gaps on an ongoing basis by rapidly assessing, accessing, and co-developing technological solutions with our allies. Ensemble, ces 5 éléments forment une plan solide pour moderniser nos défenses continentales. Before concluding, I must mention that as we modernize NORAD, we are resolutely committed to working with Indigenous and Northern communities, to meeting our legal obligations, and beyond that, to meaningful reconciliation. As we build new infrastructure engage in research and development, and create new economic opportunities, we will work alongside local communities to make sure that our investments not only meet the needs of our military, but also serve Indigenous and Northern communities. In particular, we will be relying on the unique knowledge of the North possessed by Indigenous and Northern communities, including our valued Canadian Rangers, to ensure that we deliver the best results for our military. Accordingly, the final piece that I will highlight today is the creation of a fund to enable Indigenous partners to meaningfully agree and engage with us as we deliver these initiatives. We have begun these consultations, and we will ensure that our engagement continues. We believe that Northern and Indigenous communities play a central and important role in affirming and defending Arctic and Northern policy. We will work collaboratively with them through the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework, through the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, and the Inuit Nunangut policy in affirming and defending Arctic sovereignty. To conclude, let me say that the United States remains Canada's closest and most important ally, our strongest partner, and our closest friend. And every single day, two countries collaborate on mutual priorities around the globe, delivering military aid to Ukraine, upholding the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific, and promoting stability and security in the Middle East. But our most important priority will always be to protect our citizens. In 2017, our government presented a defense policy, strong, secure, engaged, that raises our defense spending by 70% after years of underinvestment. Through Budget 2022, we are investing $8 billion in additional defense spending. Le plan d'aujourd'hui apporte d'importantes améliorations à nos défenses continentales et il va s'assurer que les forces armées canadiennes disposent des outils dont elles ont besoin pour protéger les Canadiens contre toute menace. And through our upcoming defense policy update, we will further review the resources, roles, and responsibilities of the Canadian Armed Forces to reflect our changing world. There is much to do, and there is no time to waste. Et j'ai hâte de poursuivre cette importante mission. Thank you. Merci, Miigwech. Je voudrais répondre à vos questions, si vous voulez.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now start the question and answer period, starting with journalists who are here with us today. First question.
Hi, Minister. Hi, Minister. Can you hear me? I don't think the mic's on. Hello?
Test.
Okay.
Hi, Minister. It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. I'm sorry my first question may seem very simplistic, but a news release and backgrounder have yet to be released to us. You announced today $4.9 billion over 6 years. Is this new money, or is it included in the $8 billion that your government announced in the budget?
Through the last number of years, since the introduction of Strong, Secure, Engaged, we have increased our defense spending and will continue to do so. First of all, by 70% under Strong, Secure, Engaged. Second of all, through the $8 billion in the most recent federal budget. And third of all, and in direct answer to your question, the new announcement today of the over $4 billion over 6 years, which is new money, and $40 billion, of course, over 20 years, which is funded.
Okay, thank you for that. And defense experts have warned that the Northern Warning System is incapable of responding to modern technology and the threat that it poses. You mentioned in your speech that Canada will be working with the U.S. to create a new system. Do you have any idea how long that could take? And also, are you worried about the state of our current system in the meantime?
So you're right to point to the North Warning System. Recently, we awarded a $600 million contract to NASATAC Corporation for the maintenance of the North Warning System, which will remain in place until these new capabilities are put in place. And in particular, we will unveil this North Approaches surveillance system. It will have an Arctic over-the-horizon radar system as part of it, a polar over-the-horizon radar system, as well as a new system called Crossbow to address all types of threats that we need to ensure are surveilled and are caught at an early stage. I do have additional expertise views here on this issue if you would like, General.
No, thanks for the question, and thanks, Minister. So this is all about sequencing, and the new project, the new system that's coming in is actually a layered system with the various capabilities that the Minister mentioned, but also including the surveillance from space, which is an important aspect from this as well. If you have more detailed technical questions on this, I could turn to General Pelche.
So thank you for the question to address specifically with regard to the current threat and evolving threat, which remains a concern for General Venner, the commander of NORAD, and I, and the member of NORADs that are serving our nations on a daily basis. The current and evolving threat, especially as it relates to the cruise missiles and the advanced cruise missiles fielded by our competitors, remains a concern in terms of our ability to detect and to provide timely warning to governments and leadership of both nations. So therefore, that's why the over-the-horizon radar and the layer system that General Iyer mentioned are needed in order to actually replace the note warning system. In the interim, the note warning system will continue to be maintained in order to actually provide that limited threat warning that it has been providing for the last decade.
L'explication en français aussi, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, très bien. Alors, évidemment que le général Venner, de même que moi-même, en tant que le leadership du NORAD, de même que les membres qui travaillent au sein du NORAD pour la défense des deux nations de manière journalière, nous demeurons concernés par l'évolution de la menace, principalement l'évolution de la menace qui est présentée par les missiles de croisière, qui sont en développement et qui sont présentement dans l'inventaire de nos compétiteurs. Et c'est pourquoi, justement, la mise en place d'un système trans-horizon, pour utiliser une traduction de base, le système trans-horizon ou le Over-the-Horizon Radar, va nous permettre cette détection, non seulement au niveau du cadran du Nord, mais aussi de la provenance qui peuvent provenir de l'Atlantique ou du Pacifique. Mais en attendant la mise en place de ce système, nous allons continuer à maintenir le système d'avertissement, le North Warning System dans le Nord, afin d'assurer la détection. Je crois qu'il est important de mentionner qu'on ne commence pas maintenant le travail sur le radar trans-horizon. Il y a déjà eu plus que 5 ans de recherche entre l'équipe de recherche nationale ici au Canada, de même que les laboratoires de recherche aux États-Unis. Une recherche qui a été élaborée en collaboration entre les deux pays afin de faire avancer la technologie reliée au radar trans-horizon. Je pense que c'est important de le mentionner en anglais. Over-the-horizon radar is not a new thing. It has been a capability that has been fielded. However, we're looking at the next generation of over-the-horizon radar, a capability that has been advanced through the collaborative work of both the RDC in Canada and the research lab in the U.S. Over the last 5 years. So we're almost at the point where we can actually field capabilities in replacement of the note warning system. Thank you.
Next question question.
Morning, Evan Dyer, CBC News. I'm just wondering about the new generation of missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, hypersonic glide missiles, but also submarine-launched missiles. Those don't necessarily have to come over the pole. They can come from off the eastern seaboard of the Pacific, all kinds of directions. How does Canada intend to deal with those kinds of threats?
Okay, thank you, Evan. And once again, I'll start off and then hand it over to the generals. As our threats evolve, so must our defensive capabilities. And what we aim to do with this announcement today is to ensure that we across the board are engaging in the most significant and relevant upgrade to Canadian NORAD capabilities in almost 4 decades. With that foundation, let me say that the new system of sensors that will comprise the Northern Approaches Surveillance System that I just described essentially push our line of sight further north, ensuring that we will be able to respond to fast-moving threats like hypersonics, like the number of different types of missiles that you mentioned in your question, and that are being introduced into the security environment seemingly on a monthly basis. And the idea behind our approach here is to take a very broad-based brush and say that we need to understand that missile defense has to be integrated. We have to understand that hypersonics, cruise missiles, and other types of new technologies in missiles are able to be responded to by our new Northern Approaches Surveillance System. So it's an integrated approach that we are taking in this announcement today, and I will ask General Eyre if he has anything to add.
Hey, Evan, I'll make 2 points on your question. One, you're absolutely right. We have to take a 360-degree view of the threat. So for Canada, we're focused on 10 to 2 o'clock, and that's why it's so important we're integrated with the U.S. as they cover the other avenues of approach. Secondly, we're seeing technology advance so fast. That's why the R&D component of this package is super important, because we're going to have to watch the pacing threats that are out there to be able to ensure that our defenses keep at pace. Data, anything you want to add on this one?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Chief. All right. To add, since 1958, NORAD has had the mission of aerospace warning, which speaks specifically of the threat warning and attack assessment responsibility that General Van Erck and I deliver on a daily basis to leadership of both nations. So we're acutely aware of the evolving threat that you talked about across the spectrum, specifically though of cruise missiles that can be launched from submarines, from surface vessels, from long-range aviations, or from the ground as well. And so therefore, the commander has addressed that through his requirement. He addressed specifically the warning aspect through his domain awareness requirements. And his domain awareness is not only specific to the air domain, it also englobes the maritime domain awareness as well, so that which is also part of our mission. And I can say that obviously the announcement today focused on the pretty much at 10 to 2 o'clock, as the chief mentioned. But the Americans, the U.S., have actually announced as part of their budget of 23 to 25, I guess, funding or the intention to actually fund 4 additional over-the-horizon radar, which actually will provide warning across the Atlantic, across the Pacific, into our southern approach, really bringing the domain awareness, the air domain awareness, to pretty much a 360 degrees coverage.
Could you just explain that in French too, the part about the 360?
OK, c'est bon. Ça fait que, étant donné, je pratique mon français, ce qui est bien, étant donné la mission NORAD d'avertissement au niveau du domaine aérien, on a une mission qui est spécifique, qui est l'avertissement aux 2 gouvernements par rapport à l'avertissement de menaces pouvant venir sur le continent. Puis donc, étant donné cette mission, on est très au courant justement de la menace qui évolue. Cette menace, principalement celle au niveau des missiles de croisière qui peuvent être délivrés autant du côté maritime, c'est-à-dire sous la surface, à la surface, de même que par l'aviation à longue portée de nos compétiteurs et à partir de systèmes basés au sol. Tous ces éléments-là sont des éléments qui font qu'on regarde l'évolution de cette menace-là puis comment est-ce qu'on va contrer. On a mentionné ici la mise en place du financement pour le radar transhorizon qui va avoir une vision sur l'intérieur du Canada, de même que passer que l'archipel canadien de l'Arctique et au-delà de cette distance-là. Mais les Américains ont aussi annoncé une intention de financer jusqu'à 4 radars transhorizons qui vont couvrir l'Atlantique, le Pacifique, de même que l'approche sud, nous donnant presque une couverture de 360 degrés.
Merci beaucoup. And also, obviously, one of the purposes of early warning is retaliation. Another one is to give people time to take whatever shelter they can. Are you looking also, though, in the long term, at intercepting these new forms of missiles? And are you also thinking, given the new circumstances we live in, of going back to the time when Canada was focused on civil defense, building bunkers, you know, teaching kids to hide under desks, those days? Are we going to be seeing any of that coming back?
You are right, Evan, that the threat environment has changed and has required us in devising and developing this new chapter in continental defense to address the fact that the world changed on February 24th. And in particular, we aren't just seeing the renewed threat from a military perspective, but from a climate change perspective, from an economic perspective, the threat environment has changed. And so what is very useful about your question is that you're pointing to the need for us as a government to ensure that we are addressing this new threat environment, which we are exactly doing. In terms of the threats themselves, I will say much of the discussion focuses on the Arctic and the proximity of Russia to Canada's northern reaches, as well as the Northwest Passage and the traversing of ships through that passage for research and other purposes. And I will just say at a high level that in terms of missiles, in terms of infrastructure that has a very large component in this new chapter, what we are doing is ensuring that we remain steadfast in defending Canada's sovereignty and peoples of the North and defending our national interests. And this significant upgrade to NORAD will include addressing threats that we continue to identify and threats that we have already identified. So this is not the end. This is actually the beginning and continuation of an analysis about the threat environment that we will continue to have. And as you know, we do have an ongoing defense update from a policy perspective that we will continue to work on, and we will take into account the issues and others that you raised in your question. I'll ask General Eyre if he'd like to respond to any of that.
No, thanks, Minister. And Evan, I'll just add that your question speaks to the need for our understanding of deterrence in a Canadian context. So as the Minister said, with the defense policy update, you know, I believe deterrence has a place in that defense policy update. We have deterrence by punishment, which working with our allies would be extremely important, and we also have deterrence by denial, so not allowing potential enemies to achieve their aims. Part of that is the ability to intercept, and some of the announcements, some of the capabilities, such as the air-to-air missiles, are going to be able to do that, especially with the low cross-section cruise missiles. But the other piece is denial by resilience, national resilience, and that's the other piece you talked to. So we're going to have to explore that more as part of our policy update.
Next question.
Hi, Minister. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. I just wanted to revisit the missile defense question. In 2005, a Liberal government said no to ballistic missile defense, and that resulted in Canada being removed from the decision about shoot-downs of missiles, including over our own territory. You're now looking at an opening and an opportunity to potentially be involved in the next generation of missile defense and the interception of air-breathing threats, which is directly part of NORAD's mission. If we're talking about defending critical infrastructure, which is what the Norad commander has identified, how much time do you think your government has to make a decision like that before we're cut out of any evolving system?
Well, thank you, Mercedes, for the question. I will say first and foremost that we have to remember that the way of thinking of the future in terms of missile defense is on an integrated basis. When the Prime Minister and I were in Colorado recently, the discussion largely focused on ensuring that we are, from an integrated perspective, able to respond with our capabilities. And so you see in my response earlier that that's what we are very much focused on in terms of being able to respond in an integrated way to a number of different types of threats, including cruise missiles, hypersonics, etc. Your question touched on BMD. I will say that Canada's position with respect to participation in the American ballistic missile defense system has not changed. The reality is that we will continue to look at this policy going forward. We will engage in constant analysis of the policy to ensure that Canada has a proper response to missile threats across the board. And I'll ask General Eyre if he has anything to add.
Hey, Mercedes, the concept of a stovepipe standalone ballistic missile defense is increasingly irrelevant. And what we're looking at now, and what our allies have looked at, is what's called IAMD, or Integrated Air and Missile Defense. In any system, any air and missile defense system, you've got three subsystems. You've got sensors, you've got a defeat mechanism, and you've got command and control. The sensors are increasingly networked for the variety of different threats: hypersonics, cruise missiles, bombers, ballistic missiles. The defeat mechanism, whether it is an interceptor or even think cyber, left of launch or right of launch, and then the command and control. So all of that is increasingly integrated. So to artificially have BMD in there is becoming more and more irrelevant.
Thank you. My second question is in relation to the funding as well. We don't have the background information, as my colleague Annie was mentioning. When will this money start flowing? And are we going to get a breakdown of what it's flowing to? Because $4.9 billion sounds like a lot, but that would barely cover the near and broadband communications in the Arctic.
Well, thank you. Just to be clear, we have the over $4 billion being allocated in the 6 years across, on top of the $8 billion in the federal budget, and that we have this announcement today fully funded over 20 years at approximately $40 billion. In terms of the precise breakdown, we are finalizing those particular numbers, and we can provide you with more information after that, including a backgrounder that I understand should be necessary for all of you. Thank you.
Question, next question.
Hi, Pat Brethauer from the Globe and Mail. Your government continues to be criticized by the U.S. For failing to meet our 2% GDP commitment for NATO spending. Ambassador called your $8 billion increase disappointing. U.S. Senator from Alaska says we're a freeloader. So what's a timeline for getting to 2%?
Well, thank you for the question. Not unexpected, I might add. I will say that, first and foremost, that Canada is on an upward trajectory in terms of defense spending. We are increasing defense spending by 70% under strong, secure, engaged, and have been doing so since 2017, and that's over a 9-year period until 2026. On top of that, we have the $8 billion in budget 2022, and on top of that, we have the announcement today, which is a robust package funded over 20 years to modernize Norad. So our defense spending is now on an even sharper upward trajectory. We have the 6th largest defense budget of all NATO countries. And as I discussed with the Secretary General and my NATO colleagues late last week, Canada will continue to ensure that it is funding defense and security on this continent and in terms of our NATO alliance.
En français aussi, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Il est important de rappeler que nous sommes sur une trajectoire ascendante de nos dépenses de défense depuis 2017, après que le gouvernement précédent ait laissé les dépenses de défense tomber au moins de 1%. Grâce à notre politique, par exemple, nous avons fait des investissements intelligents pour augmenter nos dépenses de plus de 70% entre 2017 et 2026. Dans le budget 2022 aussi, nous avons annoncé 8 milliards de dollars supplémentaires en nouvelles dépenses de défense. Et aujourd'hui, comme j'ai déjà dit, nous avons annoncé un ensemble robuste pour moderniser Norad. Ainsi, nos dépenses de défense sont maintenant sur une trajectoire ascendante encore plus marquée et nous continuerons à faire les investissements nécessaires pour assurer la sécurité des Canadiens.
One other question. You and others have used the word competitor. I presume that's, among others, a reference to Russia. Why not use the word opponent or even enemy, considering we're supplying arms to Ukraine?
I believe that at this time, Russia is the aggressor. Russia has violated international law. Russia is undermining the rules-based international order. I think that is pretty clear from my perspective and our government's perspective.
Thank you. I think we'll now go to the phone for some questions. Could we have the first question from the phone, please? Première question.
Thank you. Merci. If you have a question, please press *1. Pour toute question, appuyez sur l'étoile. The first question, la première question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. Please go ahead. Your line is now open. Votre ligne est ouverte. Bonjour. On entend très mal au téléphone. Je n'ai pas pu me rendre sur place. J'espère que vous m'entendez mieux. La première question que je voudrais vous poser, c'est sur le système d'alerte du Nord. J'aimerais savoir, sur le 4,9 milliards, combien ça va coûter? Et puis, quelle est la date de l'année à laquelle on s'attend à ce que ce soit complété?
Ce sont des détails, Mélanie, merci pour la question. Ce sont des détails que nous travaillons sur très fort maintenant. Mais maintenant, nous pouvons dire que nous allons avoir un nouveau système de surveillance dans le Nord. Nous allons au même temps maintenir le North Warning System et ensemble, nous avons une approche de niveau, a leveled approach, pour s'assurer que nous avons un système de surveillance dans le Nord. Mais au sujet de votre question, ce sont des détails que nous devons s'assurer à ce moment.
Une question de suivi?
Oui, une autre chose que j'ai pas entendu, mais je pense pas que ce soit à cause du vent sur la base, c'est le système anti-missile balistique. Vous, sauf erreur, vous n'en avez pas parlé. Par contre, au mois de mai, vous aviez dit que le Canada comptait probablement s'y joindre. Avez-vous du nouveau à nous dire là-dessus? Est-ce que ça va venir dans un prochain volet de 40 milliards sur 20 ans?
Si je comprends votre question, je ne pense pas que j'ai dit ça. J'ai dit toujours que la position de notre pays n'a pas changé sur le système balistique, mais nous allons avoir un système maintenant avec cet investissement pour un système intégré pour adresser beaucoup de types de missiles. Mais je ne sais pas si je comprends ta question. Si vous voulez le répéter, ça marche pour moi.
La position du gouvernement, comme vous l'avez dit au mois de mai, c'est de vous joindre au système anti-missile.
Notre position n'a pas changé sur ça à ce moment, mais comme le général R a dit jusqu'à maintenant, c'est important d'avoir un système intégré. Et ça, c'est le système de l'avenir. Et ça, c'est le système que le Canada va avoir. Un système qu'on peut voir et comprendre et avoir intégré. Et ça, c'est la chose la plus importante avec l'annonce d'aujourd'hui sur ce sujet. Intégré. This is the word of the day. Ça, c'est le mot du jour sur les missiles. Parce qu'on ne peut pas avoir seulement une approche pour un missile. Ça ne marche pas dans l'avenir et aujourd'hui. Et ça, c'est aussi souligner l'importance de la recherche et développement. Nous devons avoir un système qui peut comprendre et accepter que l'avenir, c'est un système de beaucoup de types de missiles.
Okay, and I think we'll now take one last question from the phone. Une dernière question de téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, prochaine question, Lee Bertium de Canadian Press. Votre ligne est ouverte. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the timeline question again. Obviously, military officials have been warning for years that the North Warning System is obsolete. I'm curious as to why you won't set a date for when that system will officially be replaced, and what, given the long procurement timelines and also the pace of technological change that we've been dealing with, what will be done to make sure that this project doesn't get kind of snared in, you know, these eternal procurement delays and cost overruns that have snarled many other procurement projects in the past.
Okay, let's just take a step back and understand that the North Warning System was constructed between 1986 and 1992. So, vous avez raison. You are well placed in asking the question about whether radar capabilities are becoming obsolete. There's no question that the radar capabilities under the North Warning System are challenged by modern weapons technology. After 30 years or so in operation, it is time for us to begin to invest in a modern system in order to respond to emerging threats, some of which I've outlined today. But we are well aware that we need to maintain the North Warning System to remain capable of supporting NORAD priorities while we bring the new system online. And so that's exactly what we will do. This January, we awarded a contract of almost $600 million to the Inuit-owned Nasatak Corporation to operate and to maintain the North Warning System until its replacement comes online. As we have more information about the precise timing of the changeover from one system to another, we will make that clear. At this point, what we are introducing is the fact that we will be moving to a new surveillance system, and until that time, the North Warning System will remain in place and will be operated and maintained in place. Part of that will come with the assistance of the Nasatak Corporation. Thank you.
Thank you. And a follow-up, Lee?
And as a follow-up, yes, thank you. I mean, this is $40 billion over the next 20 years. This is a significant chunk of change to be spent on something that essentially many Canadians will never see, and if it works, we won't even need it. So what would you say to those who say, you know what, this is not needed, and the government can't even afford this? You know, given the debts that we're facing and things like that, this money would be better spent on other things. What would you say to those people who say this is not what we should be doing?
So I understand that point of view, and I will say, however, that the economic benefits that Canadians are going to see through the addition of tens of thousands of Canadian jobs, adding billions to our GDP per year, will make a difference in the economic lives of Canadians. This is not something that is only going to begin in 20 years. This is something that is going to begin from a number of perspectives: detection, surveillance, infrastructure, to name a few. And all of these capabilities, as they come online, will mean additional jobs for Canadians and a contribution to the growth of the gross domestic product of our country. And so, from a needs perspective, I'll make that first point. The second point I will make relates to the changing threat environment that we have continually seen from a military perspective, from an economic perspective, and from a climate change perspective. And the reality is that our task as a government is to protect the lives of Canadians. And in order to do that, we need to have modernized systems in place. We need to meaningfully contribute to Norad and to continental defense writ large. And so our announcement today does just that. It ensures going forward the resourcing of the Canadian Armed Forces and the broader protection of the Canadian public in the face of a changing threat environment. And finally, Lee, on your point in the previous question relating to procurement difficulties, I know that that is a narrative that many espouse. I will say that our government has made significant steps in contracting and in getting procurements out the door. I note as an example 3 Arctic offshore patrol ships in the water of 6. I note, for example, the contracting phase for the F-35's 88 future fighter jets being in the final phase. I note, for example, the cameras for drones that our government turned around a contract for within days to supply cameras to Ukrainian armed forces fighting on the front lines and needing them for their drones. So I would simply push back a little in terms of procurement progress that our government will continue to make. Yes, there is more work to do with my Deputy Minister, Bill Matthews, with the Chief of Defence Staff, General Eyre. We will continue to work on making procurement more efficient and more effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. This is what ends today's press conference. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bon après-midi.